I kept thinking, oh, you're not doing it because you don't think you're good enough, or, you're just being lazy. But in reality, I just didn't want it. And when I got clear on that,
Yeah.
I had to tell myself, like, you're good at this and you are not going to do it. You are going to do something else that excites you, that fulfills you. And these skills that you have, they will always be there.
Welcome to the Chingona Revolution podcast, where we will bring out your inner badass Latina, overcome self-doubt, help you gain clarity, and pave your own path, all while leading with courage. I am your host, Latina coach and speaker, Erica Cruz. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Chingona Revolution podcast. Today's conversation is an interview with one of my clients who works in the tech industry. We talked all about her involvement in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within the tech industry, what it's like to be the only Latina in the room, the only Latina on her team, moving to different states for work. We also talked about really unbinding our identity to work, right? Like not finding our value and our identity within work, which sometimes as Latinas or as underrepresented community or just from immigrant parents, it's so easy to do that. We also talked about, how we tend to look for validation from our parents and how to still choose yourself while holding respect for your parents. I mean, we talk about the fear of failure. We had a lot of amazing conversations. And the guest that I have on is my amazing client, Viry Medina, who works at Google as a business operations program manager. She is making the tech world run a little smoother. Pero her heart truly beats for two things: cuddling her furry sidekicks, Snuffles and Luna, and empowering Latinas to crush their goals and rewrite the rules for success. She has 8 years of experience working in tech, from hiring superstar intern talent to supporting performance management. She's explored various corners of the tech world, which we get into during the interview. And through it all, Viry has been a champion for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, building spaces where everyone feels valued and unstoppable. She is a lifelong learner who loves expanding her network, so don't be a stranger. Make sure that you go and say hi to her, share your story, or just chat about anything, because honestly, the internet is for more than just work. And she has this awesome blog at hey-vd.com. So we'll link all of her links down below in the show notes so that you can check her out and connect with her. Viry is also a client inside of Courage Driven Latina that has worked on a variety of courage projects, from a business courage project to a baking courage project to what she's doing now. And if you are interested in joining us inside of the next round of Courage Driven Latina, the doors are opening on July 29th, 2024. Mark your calendar, talk to your partner, do all the things that you need to do to ensure that you are ready for the day that we open doors, because we will have a 48-hour bonus that I don't want you to miss. All right, let's get into the interview. If you can introduce yourself and tell us what you do, who you are, and any details that you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erica. I'm so excited to be here. It feels like almost like a dream come true, having seen you from the outside to now being on the podcast. So the pleasure is all mine. But yes, my name is Viry Medina. I am a program manager in tech, specifically within HR at Google. I've been at the company for 8 years now, started off as an intern. And outside of work, I like to tell folks I'm a sister, I am a girlfriend, I am the eldest daughter of immigrants, and I am a very proud dog mom to 2 dogs, Snuffles and Luna. They are my world. One of my passion projects or things I really enjoy doing are just helping other Latinas in tech or first gen folks get ahead in their career, and using my own experiences and learnings to uplift them and elevate them so that we have like the best leaders taking over corporate in the next years to come.
Beautiful. I love it. Sometimes I look at your career trajectory, Viry, and I'm like, that could have been the path that I took, like, because I really wanted to work at Google. And I ended up interviewing, and I got to, I think, almost the final round. And then there was some reorganizational stuff, like some restructuring, which, as you know, this happens a lot at Google. Because
Yes.
I was like, maybe they were just trying to like be nice and not tell me that I didn't get the job. But I mean, after having worked with you for almost a year now, I'm like, no, they do go through their fair share of restructuring. Yeah, so I ended up like not getting the job and that door closed. So like when I look at you, I'm like, damn, you're just doing the work that I was so passionate about when I was in tech, which was creating space for Latinas and creating space for people of color, because tech is our future. And if we don't have people like us in tech companies and in the tech industry, we won't be considered, right, in the future. So tell me a little bit about that experience of being a Latina in tech, because I know that we've spoken about you maybe being the only individual of color or the only Latina on your team. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
It's been a wild ride. Thinking about it, I always tell folks I didn't strongly identify as Latina when I first joined tech. Most of my life into my early 20s, I felt the pressure to belong and to fit in. And that definitely stems from having immigrant parents. That was what they told us to do. Don't stand out, blend in with the herd. And I really took that to heart, to the point that when I went to college, I went by Anna. I didn't go by Viry. I really just kind of wanted to be part of the broader group, and I took that identity with me into Google, especially because my first job was in customer service, and I was dealing with small to medium businesses, and I'd be on calls where folks would say, "I want to talk to someone in the U.S." If your name was too weird, whatever they defined that, they would say, "You're not in this country, transfer me over to the US side," or questioning their intellect based on their name or if they had some sort of accent, which was terrible. It was not the great place that I imagined starting off in tech, but I built thick skin. Um, and it was in that first job, though, that I met a really good friend. She and I are still connected, and she was a total badass. She embraced her Latinidad, and she called things out, and she wasn't afraid to be her most authentic, unapologetic self. And I'm just so happy that that resonated with me, because I saw that and I said, I want that for myself. I want to be as proud of my background and my name and my upbringing as she is, because she's amazing. Like she's a total leader, and she has been at the company for, we started at the same time. And I remember we were in a conversation where we talked about the ways in which us as Latinas have made adjustments for others so that we can make life easier for them. And that was the first time where I realized, wow, my name has been an adjustment for others. And it was, whenever I'd go out and get coffee or the doctor, anywhere, I loved life as Anna. No one messed it up ever. But if they saw Viry Liana, it was scary. It was like, what is this? Or they just call me Medina because Medina is also a first name, and they assumed that was my first name. And they're like, that's easier than Viry Liana. So I had a really interesting relationship with my name and everything when I started at the company. And thanks to this person that I met, I switched jobs out of the customer sales side. And when I went into HR, I saw that as like a rebirth. I was starting over, and I introduced myself as Viry. And it was such a scary thing to do, because I was carrying my old network of folks who knew me as Anna and going into this new space as Viry. And it was also HR. And I was the youngest one, and oftentimes the only person of color in Seattle. I moved into the Seattle office at that time. And, in my head, I was thinking, was this a good time to switch? Maybe Anna would be easier because I'm in Seattle, of all places. There's not a lot of diversity. But I stuck it through. Everyone was super welcoming. I got a few questions about my name, and I told them, I'm just at a phase in my life where I really want to embrace my identity. I want to be proud of where I come from. It's really important to me. It adds value. And, there's not much more to that. And I like Viry because Viridiana is reserved for my parents when I'm in trouble. Like, no one calls me Viridiana. So yeah, I went through that journey, and that was the start. But I think all throughout my time at Google, there's good days and there's bad days. There's situations where I really felt like leaving because I felt like people didn't respect diversity. There were situations where, I would get confused for the wait staff or the help staff because I always talked to them and I'd be having conversations with them in Spanish. Um, or oftentimes the door would get closed on me and I had to prove that I worked there. Show me your badge, show me you actually work here. Or being told, you can't come into this meeting room, like, do you belong here? Someone verbatim asking me, do you belong here? Jokingly, but also with all the layers of identity, it just becomes a very nuanced question. And then, you know it definitely didn't feel great. I think especially within tech, there's a hierarchy where there's the software engineers who, tech exists with software engineers. We don't have tech without them. And then me being not only a woman of color, but also in HR and being the youngest one, oftentimes in these spaces, there are just a lot of things that made me feel less than. And I didn't feel like I had the support system to battle that. So oftentimes it was me just kind of hanging with my head low, figuring out who on my team I could trust to have these conversations or just have space to say, this was a shitty thing that happened. And as I started finding my people, there was an event that we had at Google called the Latinx Student Leadership Summit. And I got to work on an event where we invite 50 students from across the country to, just come together, learn about tech. We prepare them for the interview. And that was the first time where the organizer of the event, my really good friend Josh, who's now at Netflix, he empowered me to embrace my identity. He was like, your identity matters. We need this for this job. Without your experience, we can't do this program. This is what makes it. He really pushed me and made me feel valued and seen. And since then, I was like, okay, these are my people. My voice truly matters. And I will not be quiet, while also balancing, the corporate politics of when can I speak up, who's in the room, who has my back. I think communities at that point I realized was really important. Like, I had my one friend from my customer sales time that I reach out to, but I saw the power of having a network, of having a village behind you to say, not just, hey, I'm having a shitty day, but here's the situation. What are we going to do? How can we be strategic about changing the narrative or changing things with the company to make it better? Not just for ourselves. I think that was one of the great things about the people I worked with. It was never just for us. It was for us and who's to come. Like, we wanted the next people coming in to have a significantly better experience, and knowing that, it's like, oh, we survived this. It doesn't mean everyone has to survive. They can just start off thriving.
Beautiful. I just want to go back to, well, first I want to validate that I think sometimes maybe whenever they're listening, they can maybe think like, oh, like just be yourself. But I want to validate like the fact that when you are the eldest daughter of immigrant parents and what you were essentially conditioned to do was to try to fit in and to try to not take up space, right? And like this narrative we hear so much in our culture of like, calladita te ves más bonita, you have to be humilde, right? Don't take up space. Like we hear all of these narratives. And if you don't speak Spanish, what I said, that translates to you look prettier when you're quiet. So like, don't be too loud, don't take up too much space, be humble. And between those narratives and you being this eldest daughter where you have this responsibility of not just your well-being but even the entire family's well-being, right? Like your parents, your younger siblings, and then to be in the tech space and then to land a job as big as Google, like the last thing you want to do is throw it away. So it makes so much sense that you were like, let me not be too loud, let me not take up that much space, until you saw an example of how that was done and how it was possible and what that was able to do. So I just validates like why we need more people of color, why we need more diversity in these tech spaces, and how having this friend available to you was just visible to you was a big change. So I know that you mentioned that there was this conference, and whenever you and I crossed paths, I know that you were like mentoring and coaching college students. So was that conference what kicked off this like kind of mentorship, and how did you find fulfillment in that space?
It's a really good question. Actually, it started before that conference. I Google used to have this internal program where you could volunteer to go to one of the universities they were working with and recruit college talent for their internships or their entry level roles. And so I signed up for it. I want to say about a year into my time at the company, and I got matched to FIU, Florida International University. And so I got to go to Florida. I was having a really great time there. And I went with two software engineers, I remember. And it was really interesting because I'm super outgoing when I'm in front of people. I try to get the crowd hype, and students don't always want to get hype, and it's a little cringy. But they introduced me to all these really great students. They were alum, and we did a session introducing them to Google and all the opportunities. And I remember, it was me and two male software engineers. At the end of that session, a group of women came to me and they said, "You're the first Latina I've ever met that works in tech." And it took everything for me to not cry in that moment, to realize the impact that my presence was having. And then it was emotional. And then at the same time, I felt bad because I was like, I don't even work in tech. Like, I have no technical skills. They were software engineers, they were on the computer science track. And I was like, wow, if only I could have found a Latina or gotten a Latina to come join me, that was a software engineer here, so that, even just having that connection. And so they were asking me a lot of questions, they were picking my brain. And it, I don't know, I guess in my world, I'd always been so closed off to realize how much of a privilege being in these spaces were and how important it was to show up for others. And that moment landed me my next job at Google, where I moved into an event recruiting role. I was hosting events across the country to attract industry talent. But it was that moment where I was like, students need us. My job ended up working with industry talent, but I said, we need to be there before that. We need to be there before they're in the a We need to let them know from a very young age that they matter, that they have what it takes to stick it through, and they need to see it happening. And so from that moment on, I kept volunteering internally at the company through these programs. And then something I don't talk about too often, but I am a Posse scholarship recipient. And so if you haven't heard about Posse, their whole thing is that you're more likely to graduate college if you have your posse with you. And so they send you with 9 or 10 other students from your city to go to a college out of state, usually. And they have you go through a program for, the year before you go into college. And then all throughout college, you meet with your posse so that you have that connection point and that support system to get through higher education. And so when I moved back to Chicago, I linked back up with them, and I said, hey, I've been mentoring college students through Google, and that's been super impactful. And now I also want to give back to, my scholarship program. Y'all were a really big part as to why I ended up at Google in the first place. Y'all prepared me. You partnered me with great mentors. So let me pay it forward. And it's just been another way to also kind of get out of my Google bubble where, Google's a big brand. Everyone knows it. And I wanted to make sure I was opening up opportunities for folks that don't have as easy access to someone who works at the company to say, hey, like, I'm here. I can be that initial connection to the network I've grown internally.
How amazing. And, as you were talking, I wrote down you can find purpose within your career, because I think a lot of people feel like they can't explore the things that are fulfilling to them or the things that they're curious about within their job. But a lot of times, I mean, you were the one who volunteered, right? Like, you saw that you enjoyed working with college students and you kept volunteering. And then you even took it a step further to even go outside of Google and do it within like the Posse Scholarship, which is amazing. And I think people feel like, oh my gosh, I have to go find my thing. And it's always going to be like either with entrepreneurship or with like the perfect job. But there's so many ways of making your actual career more fulfilling. And this is a prime example. And I always talk about like when I was in tech, I was curious about becoming a yoga instructor and I went through yoga teacher training and then I became the yoga instructor for the tech company. And it was like, then they paid me for that on the side too. And so there's so many ways of bringing purpose into your career. And I wanted to talk about like connecting your identity to career and to accomplishments. But I think even before we get into that conversation, I want to go back to the fact that you are the eldest daughter of immigrant parents. Like we've talked a lot about this inside of Courage Driven Latina. We've talked a lot about this one-on-one. And, I just the fact that like you have gotten yourself to where you've gotten with no real mentorship within your family, like you are the one blazing the trail. And to be a Posse scholar and to have worked at Google and you've moved around, you've lived in different states. And are you a homeowner?
Yes.
Yeah. And I was like, I feel like she is, but for some reason I wasn't sure yet. To be a homeowner, I mean, like these are so many accomplishments without having a ton of support and guidance. Like you are the one that is giving the support and the guidance to your family. So tell us a little bit about the pressures of being the eldest daughter of immigrant parents.
Oh my goodness, where to begin? So many pressures. I I remember when I first went to college, my dad wasn't happy because even though I got a scholarship, it's always been I'm definitely my father's daughter. He and I are so alike, and he is always the one I want to impress and get validation from. My mom's always been a free spirit, and she's always more open minded. So I kind of assume that she's on my side all the time, and that I don't have to sway her as much. And she's always been supportive. She's like, I don't love it, but you'll figure it out. I trust that you'll figure it out, which I really appreciate. My dad's a lot more hesitant, and so I feel like after I left Chicago to go to college, to go to work, it was a lot of me fighting my dad and seeking his approval because despite the accomplishments they were, he wasn't happy because I was leaving. And he comes from a very small town, Tuxpan Guerrero, and coming to this country, not having his parents, like there's so much I've understood through therapy and just a lot of reflection of like why he views things the way he does. And he's come a long way, but it's so different from what he grew up with when very much a patriarchal culture. And although he's not super like machista, there's definitely moments where that comes out because I'm a woman. And so him saying things like, I, I remember he told me once, I wish it hadn't been you that left home because you're a woman. That should have been your brothers that left. And that hurt because I've always been so dang proud of, in my family, people didn't believe in me, like my broader family. I have a 12-year-old brother. We have an 18-ish year gap. And people thought he was my kid. People in my family, they're like, oh, she got pregnant and her parents are hiding it and like she's not going to do much with her life. I've had people tell my dad, she's not worth the educational investment. She's just going to find a man and like run away and get pregnant. And so every time I don't do those things, I'm so proud. I'm like, y'all didn't believe in me and look at what I'm doing. And so it's so hard sometimes for me to like share that with my dad. Like, I just wanted to be proud because I'm a woman. Like, don't say that because I'm a woman, I shouldn't be doing these things, that I shouldn't be a homeowner, that I shouldn't leave home, that I shouldn't, go explore all these things, especially because you did it. And I know you're a man, but you did all these things. My mom did all these things, and you respect her decision, so respect mine. And it's taken a lot of massaging things into his brain, but yeah, it wasn't until he heard it from other people. When I went to college, he was like, no, you should stay in state. I'll pay for it. I'll take out the loans. Don't worry about it. And I was like, Dad, I have a full tuition scholarship. Like, how would I turn that down, and like I'll basically go for free with financial aid. Like I just can't do that to you. I can't do that to myself. And so I left, and then the plan was to come back to Chicago, and he's super excited about that. And then when I told him I got the job at Google in Mountain View, California, and I'd be moving to California, he was not happy. He was like, "What are you doing? You should come back home." I had interned with Allstate Insurance, and they were interested in hiring me full time. And I didn't finish the interview process because I got Google. I knew I wanted that. And he was very adamant about, he's like, "You should go into insurance. It's right here. What are you doing? What are you going to do in California? What is this Google thing?" He didn't realize how big it was until he would tell people about it. He's like, "Oh, like, with college, oh yeah, my daughter got a scholarship." And then they're like, "Oh, that's so amazing. Like, she must be super smart, blah, blah, blah." And then he warmed up to the idea, like, "Oh yeah, like, it's so good that you went. And like, I'm so proud of you." And then when I went to Google, he didn't get it. And then when he would start wearing the Google shirts, people were like, "Oh, like, how did you get a Google shirt?" And he'd tell them, and then they'd tell him how great it was, and blah blah blah. And so he was like, now he's really proud. He always wears Google shirts. But it definitely hasn't been easy, and I've questioned a lot of times if I shouldn't move forward with the decision because I seek my dad's approval so much. I I don't like confrontation. I'm very much sometimes a pacifist to a fault. I'm such a yes girl. I want to please my parents. I'm a parent pleaser, and so most of my life I grew up doing what they wanted. And these big things of going out of state for college, moving cross country. I did it a couple of times when I moved up to Seattle too. They weren't happy about that. Um, it's always been questioning, like, do I have the strength to fight my parents' expectations for the sake of what I think is best for me? And I say that because I never dreamt of working at Google. And I always feel bad saying that because a lot of people do dream of working at this company. And for me was, I just need a job. I need a job that'll help me and my family get ahead. And as I was pursuing all these things, I wasn't chasing my dream. I was just chasing what I thought was the next best thing for me, where I knew I wanted a career at the company. I knew I wanted to grow. I was excited about going from customer sales to HR. I really want to get into HR. And so doing these things it was hard because it wasn't just fighting the expectations that society had placed on me, but also my parents are like, "What are you doing? What do you mean you're not coming back home? What do you mean you're going to go live solo in Seattle? What do you know about Seattle?" And then not having them understand my job when I would tell them, like, "Hey, it kind of sucks. I'm the only Latina in this space. It feels really weird." And them telling me, like, "But you have such a good job. Why are you complaining? Don't complain. Be thankful that you have this job. Don't think about those things. Why does it matter? Why does your identity matter?" Hearing that from my parents is so hard. But it's also then choosing, do I sit down and have this conversation with them to explain it? Um, or do I save my own energy and just say, "You know what, you're right. Like, let's leave this conversation for another day because I don't have what it takes right now to navigate this." And deciding, like, what is the outcome of this conversation? So I don't know if that fully answers the question. Point is, being the eldest daughter has been hella stressful, and it doesn't feel good that I sometimes find I have to fight my parents and their ideals, and doing that in a way where I'm like, I don't dislike our culture, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect, and I can still do things and do them better, and that's okay. I still respect it. It just needs to be different.
Do you feel stuck in your life or in your business and you're not sure what's next? Maybe you're like, "I don't know what the vibe is, but this ain't the vibe." So maybe you're ready for something different, even if you don't know what different means, even if you don't know what that transition is just yet. Well, if so, I hear you. And the best way to make a pivot in your life or in your business is to work on a courage project, which is what we do inside of Courage Driven Latina. Courage Driven Latina is a 12-month group coaching program that is designed to help you pivot and take action and completely transform who you are in just 90 days. We do this through working on a courage project. Inside of the program, we help you identify what your courage project is, not just your first courage project. We help you create a plan for the entire year that you're in the program, but you are going to see a difference in just 30 days and you will be unrecognizable in just 90 days. Whether you're in the middle of a life transition, struggling with self-doubt, maybe you're tired of starting and stopping a project, or if you're feeling lonely in your goals and in your dreams, maybe you are the only entrepreneur in your friend group, then this program is for you. A courage project can be starting a business, writing poetry, launching a podcast, starting your healing journey, or building the confidence to date after a divorce. No matter the project, my courage framework will help you overcome the obstacles and make your dreams a reality. Inside of Courage Driven Latina, you're going to build confidence, you're going to build courage, and you are going to do it with a supportive community of badass women who are cheering you on every step of the way. Be sure to join the waitlist by going to couragedrivenlatina.com. We also have the link down below in the show notes because the doors are opening soon. The doors open on July 29th, and we will have a special 48-hour bonus that I do not want you to miss. So mark your calendar, talk to your partner, mentally prepare, because I don't want you to miss this bonus. There is no better time to join this program than now. We have a completely revamped curriculum. The community is incredible. I mean, we have people of all walks of life in this program. And if you've been eyeing it, do not wait. Now is the best time to join. Again, the doors are opening on July 29th. So be sure to join the wait list. And I can't wait to work with you. Totally. Yes. You said so many good things. So first, I just want to commend you on your courage to share that you seek your parents' approval, because we all do, whether we admit it or don't admit it. And the fact that you can speak about it openly, yet you still accepted the scholarship. You still went out of state to go to school. You still accepted the Mountain View Google job. And then you went to Seattle, and then you bought a home. Like, despite having these parent pleasing tendencies that we all have, you still have had the courage to do what's best for you. And your parents have always ended up catching up to like understanding, even if they don't understand in that moment, right? It's kind of like when I left my tech job and my mom thought I was crazy. And now she's like, I'm so glad. But at that time, she couldn't understand it. And, you know, our parents are allowed to have their own opinion, and it's going to hurt us sometimes, but they have their own perception of reality. And even this idea of being the only Latina in the room, they probably never had that experience because they probably worked amongst other immigrants, right? So like they've always had connection and community, and they don't know what it's like to be almost this generation that's like at home. It's like we are very, very Latina, but in the workplace, we have to show up as this different identity. And like, they don't really understand the code switching that's necessary in order to stay at a job, be successful at the job. And like, I'll never forget when I started working in tech, I had two roommates, and we were like putting things away in the kitchen, and I put the pots in the oven because it's like what we did at home. And then like the girl was Persian and the guy was white, and the girl was like, oh my God, I turned on the oven and there was pots in there. And she was like so taken aback. And I'm like, this is why sometimes we code switch, right? Because like, even though it was such a normal thing in my Mexican household to have pots in the oven, my white roommates, my American roommates, were not used to that. So thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people feel seen with everything you shared about being the eldest daughter. As you know, we don't have a lot of eldest daughters inside of Courage Driven Latina. Yes. So I'm the only daughter. So I'm the eldest, but I'm also the youngest. And I feel like my brother is the oldest, but the fact that he's a guy, it's just like not this, he has different expectations on him, right? Just similar to you. Like I remember like I wasn't allowed to play soccer because I was a girl. Like there's so many things I couldn't do because I was female. And I remember being so upset about it even as a kid. But look at us now. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about identity, which is what you were talking about earlier. Let's talk a little bit about identity within the workplace. So whenever you and I cross paths, I remember you talking about pretty much like your identity and the way that I say this with a lot of love, but I want to remember that you said your worthiness was tied to your job. And maybe you didn't say it exactly in those words, but I remember on a coaching call, we were talking about this. Tell us what was going on in the workplace and like how, because I think a lot of people can relate to this, right? Like their job title or maybe the amount that they're paid that directly reflects how they view themselves and their worthiness level, which is not true, but I think at some point we've probably all experienced this. So if you feel comfortable, can you share with us what you were going through?
Yes, no, that's been a big part of my healing and transformational journey is untangling my worth from my job title. Um, and I've been trying to figure out like where does this stem from? Like how did I attach myself so much to my job? Part of it is I've been at this company for so long. I started off as an intern and then converted full time, and so it's the only place I've ever known. Throughout my 20s now, I'll be 30 in a couple months. So like all of my 20s were spent at this company. They kind of I internally I tell folks like I'm Google grown. Like anything I know is at this company, and so because they came to me with such an immense package in terms of I, younger me could never have imagined working at a place like I do now and all of the benefits and perks that I get, that there was a lot of gratitude attached to it of like, oh my gosh, I owe my job everything I am now because without my job, I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't be a homeowner. I wouldn't be able to provide for my parents. I wouldn't be able to have trips, all these things that I've gotten because of the money they've given me. In my head was framed as it's thanks to them. And so I am them. I am the job. And I remember there's like two parts to my time at the company. There's like this first half where all I could think about and talk about was work. And whenever I was out, even at parties, I mean, partying in SF, you bump into all the tech people. And so everyone was tech. And I felt like it was always like a competition, like who's got the better things going on or whatever. And then I moved up to Seattle, and I remember I had a couple college friends visit me, and all I could talk about was work. I felt valuable because of work, and it's because I kept giving, and it kept giving me money and opportunity. And I was like, oh, this is just this endless cycle of I give and give and give everything. It gives me some compensation back, and this compensation allows me to do all these amazing things for my family, for myself. But I wasn't happy. I was miserable. I wasn't taking vacation. I wasn't taking care of myself. I dreamt about work. I still do sometimes. I like really intense work dreams where I think I'm still at work. And I can't wake up because I'm like, I'm at work, right? And then I wake up, I'm like, no, I have to actually go to work now. But I right before I joined Courage and Latina, there was just something had sparked in my head where I was like, I need to not be so work focused. And I had been trying it with the blog back in like 2019, but it wasn't really hitting. And then I was doing a recruiting job where I got to hire intern students. And it was a full circle moment because I was hiring for the same program that got me into Google. And so it was so special for me to be part of that process now and be on the other side and helping
Mm-hmm.
other people land their dream jobs and get them into Google. And I realized that I cared so deeply about this mission that it was further tying my worth into it because I wanted others to have the same opportunities I did,
Yeah.
especially students of color or students who didn't see themselves at the company, regardless of their identity. It's for whatever reason they thought like, oh, I'm not going to make it there, and to like help them see like how amazing they were that they belonged here. And that job was as special as it was damaging because as much as I loved working with my candidates, opening doors, being part of that process, I cared so much that I was damaging my own worth and my own capacity to care for myself because everything was going to the job. Also, students work weird hours. I forgot about that life. So I was always
Mm-hmm.
working. I was getting emails at like 10 p.m., 3 in the morning, like, hey, I need to reschedule my interview. Hey, I'm really stressed out. And I would always try to show up for them because that mattered to me. I wanted them to succeed. And I burnt out really hot, really fast. There was, I remember this one day in my house, my boyfriend came in and found me face down on the hardwood floor, not very comfortable. I was just sobbing. Like, I just couldn't get out. I was sobbing so hard. And he's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And I told him, I got a bad evaluation at work and it doesn't feel great because I care so much about my job. And I'm giving my heart to my job,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not being recognized for it. They're telling me I'm not doing enough. And now I feel like a failure of a person because something I care about so deeply, I'm being told isn't good enough. And that was a really hard time in my life. I remember, it was almost like a moment where I was depressed because something I had fought so hard for wasn't panning out the way I expected. And I remember I went to therapy. I ultimately decided I had to leave that job. And it was one of the hardest things I've done because I chose myself. And
You did.
normally I hadn't chosen myself before. When I went to college, I tell folks, I didn't know if I wanted to go to college, but it was expected that I had to go to college because I had to achieve the American dream. So I did it, and I love learning and I love structure. It worked out in my favor. So I did it, but I don't know that I ever felt within me like, yes, college is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to Google, it was obviously a really amazing opportunity, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is my dream. It was like, this is really great for me and my family, and I'm just going to go after it because my family needs this, right? I need to prove that I'm successful. And then throughout my career changes, I made the switch into HR, but it was always like, I need to keep working so that I can build a career for my family, continue to like buy into this ideal successful person. But when I landed in this recruiting job that I loved and it didn't work out, I was like, okay, I need to find something that allows me to prioritize and heal myself away from work because I gave work too much. It
Mm-hmm.
burned me out. I'm miserable. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what my purpose is. I felt really lost. And so when I came to Courage Driven Latina, I, I was like in this space of, I know what I need to do. I'm very self aware of what's happening. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get out of this funk. I was in a new job at that time. I'm like, I found a new job. I'm not really sure what it is, but it allows me to detach from work, but I'm still not fully detached because it still holds so much weight to my identity. It still matters so much. Like, I wasn't just Vidi, the sister, girlfriend, daughter. I was Vidi, the Googler first, and then
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And I wasn't showing up for myself. And so it was a lot of untangling and mindset work that I really had to work on to make sure that, work is here and then be the person is here. But I also didn't know who I was. Because my whole life I've been pleasing others. I did all the things I did for my parents. And then, you know, coming to a point where I don't want to live for my parents. I want to live for me, but I don't know what that looks like because I'm constantly seeking my parents' approval. I want my dad to give me that like thumbs up. Now I have a partner and I'm like, I want you to do great. I want to help you do great, but I don't know what it looks like for just Vidi to be great on her own, or who she is without all these identities. Um, and that made me a little sad is because I was like, there's got to be more to me than work and my family. I mean, they're great things and I love them. Don't get me wrong. I'm so grateful, but that can't be it. There has to be something else.
And what did you like? What else was there? What did you learn, or what happened like once you joined Courage Driven Latina? Because when you joined, you thought you wanted to work on a business. I love how you were so wrapped up in work and you were like, I need to go start a business. Like, let's just throw more on her already really full plate.
Yes. One of the things I did when I was going through a funk in my recruiting job, I took coaching classes with the Collective Training Institute. There you go. And it was the first time I got out of like my Google bubble completely with all these other folks who wanted to coach and do coaching work. And it was super impactful and I loved it. And everyone in there was starting a coaching business.
Mm.
Um, or they were managers at the companies that they were working at, and that's how they were leveraging their skills. And I was, again, one of the youngest in the room. And I was like, dang, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not a manager. I'm not on track for being a manager, and I don't think I want that. And now I have this coaching thing. What am I going to do? And so I felt pressure to build a business. And I remember I worked with a different business coach for a little bit. And I had this coaching program, and then I didn't launch it because my recruiting job was pretty hectic. And then layoffs were hitting tech really hard. And I was like, well, now I really have to have a business because if I get laid off, I need something. I need to be productive. Like anything I work on outside of work has to have purpose, it has to have value. And unless it produces like a quantifiable outcome, there's no value in it, was my mindset. So when I saw your page, I started following you. I'm like, yep, this is it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to come out with a business. I'm going to really do it this time. And it's going to be great. I'm going to need a job. I'm going to have the space for it. I have this coaching thing I did. And then in our conversations and, with the mindset work, I realized I didn't want a business. That was part of why I couldn't launch. I was resisting it because I actually didn't want it. I didn't want to be uh, coaching others as my full time or part time job, as fulfilling as it was to help others. And like the thought of booking calls and being in spaces with others just doesn't fulfill me. And then I also realized that I wasn't pursuing it for the right reason because I was so focused on I need a backup plan if layoffs happen. But this wasn't a passion, it wasn't a purpose. It was just like, I need to do this. And so in our conversations, I realized what I needed was play. I needed more fun in my life. I was so consumed by work and then by I really need to launch a business because I need to be purposeful in this life. And if I'm not purposeful, what am I doing? Um, and so I remember in our first chat, you encouraged me to bake, and it was so relieving to hear that because I was like, I really don't want more work. Like I'm so tired. I think I was still processing everything that happened from burning out before, that the thought of doing more work wasn't appealing, but I was like, I have to do it. This is just a thing. Like I put myself on this path and that's what I need to do. And then you're like, actually, you need to bake. And I was like, this is wild. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, um, but I
And let me
walked away
explain
feeling
why.
great.
The Courage Project rules are it has to excite you, it has to scare you, and it has to make you or the world a better place. And by making you a better person, the world becomes a better place. And the coaching business did not excite you at
No,
all. And that's why I was like, yep, that's definitely not it.
no, it didn't. And I couldn't see that. And I think one of the things that I learned from that, and it, it was like a failed attempt. It was like two failed attempts. It's like I did it once, I had a program I didn't launch, and I went again, and I realized I didn't want it, so I didn't launch. I think I wrote this in a blog post, or I said this during a talk I did, but being good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. That was what I
Oh,
learned from this.
yes.
Because when I was in my coaching program, not to toot my own horn, but I got a lot of really good feedback. People were like, you're a really good coach. You're so natural at it. Like, you're so good at listening and like being in tune with the person. Um, I was like, oh, this is great. I like positive feedback. Like, I'm good at it. Really, people want to feel like they're good at stuff. And so I was like, this is my gift to the world. I have to do it. Um, but I didn't want to. And so I was like, it's okay to have the skills. I'm like, I know I have what it takes to build a business.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of why I was so hard on myself and I kept trying, was because I kept thinking, oh, you're not doing it because you don't think you're good enough, or, you're just being lazy. But in reality, I just didn't want it. And when I got clear on that,
Yeah.
I had to tell myself, like, you're good at this and you are not going to do it. you are going to do something else that excites you, that fulfills you, and these skills that you have, they will always be there. So that means I can do coaching at another time, or I can bring
Totally.
those gifts up whenever needed. Like I still mentor, and so that's something I'll
Exactly.
leverage.
You literally are coaching people. You do not need a whole business to do it when you're already mentoring students, and even just within your work at Google, like being a good leader and being good at communicating with people, being a good listener, being able to coach, like that's only going to help you in your job. And I have no doubt that like if you decided that you did want a business in the future, it's going to happen. But with where you are right now, it was you were doing it for the wrong reasons, which you
Mm-hmm.
just admitted, right, yourself. And I wanted to go back to you made a comment about a thought you had about yourself that you were just being lazy. And I think that that thought, as Latinas or as people of color, or just like from underserved communities, that sometimes when we don't do things, we can have that narrative of like, oh, I'm just being lazy or I'm being unmotivated, or and we shame ourselves in that way when like, well, okay, what's the other possibility? What if it's not the right time for it? What if it's not actually what you want to do right now, right? There's so many other truths. And for you, it was not that you were lazy. I mean, you just told us how much you've worked through college, how much you've worked at Google, the different jobs you've had. Like lazy is literally not in your DNA.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes
Purposeful rest, yes, that is something we're working towards, like
yes.
not just you, like literally everybody who listens to this podcast, I think. But so I think a big way, or a big, looking from the outside in, I don't mean to make assumptions, but we do a challenge inside the program called the failure challenge, which helps you overcome the fear of failure. And we submit inside of our community anytime that you take an action that could possibly result in failure. So, like asking for a day off, asking somebody on a date, posting something on social media, right? These are all things that qualify for the failure challenge. And you won this challenge not once, but twice. So, the last two times that we've done it, you have been the winner of this challenge. So, you've taken so much action. And I really feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like by removing that fear of failure and allowing yourself to take action, it's how you ended up with so much clarity. Would you say that that's true?
Yes, I
Okay. And then
completely agree.
in your entry survey, whenever you joined Courage Driven Latina, one of the questions I have is, have you tried to like work on your goals already? How did it go? Where did you get stuck? And you said, my fear of failure. I'm so caught up with getting it just right, and it holds me back. Yet here we are as the winner of the person who is taking action despite the fear of failure, right? Like you won the failure challenge twice. So tell us a little bit about how your relationship with failure has changed since joining the program.
Oh my goodness. I remember, I don't know if it was we probably said this in the first challenge, but you often remind us of like our ghetto first draft. And that framing really, really helped. Where it's like, oh, you can't get to your 100th podcast if you don't do the first one. You can't move forward if you don't just put something out there. Um, and it was about reframing it to what's the best thing that could happen. And in addition to that, it's like believing in my capacity to know that if it doesn't work out, I'm capable of managing whatever the outcome is. That was a really big thing. And so I remember the first time around, it was, I crave structure. I love it. Like the more structure there is in something, the better it works with me. And so when you're like, you have to submit daily and like it's for this period, I was like, okay, VD, like you have a goal. And it wasn't so much about the prize, although I love talking with you, but I was like, okay, I have a goal. I just daily, what am I going to do every day? I remember the first time around, I was journaling about it. And I was like, okay, here's what I did. Here's what happened. And 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10, nothing terrible happened. Like I would get like all this anxiety built up. And then I was like, oh, I posted and it was fine.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it didn't get a lot of engagement, but like it's out there. Like I did it. Like I put it together and it's out there. And then that was a win. Or, I took a day off of work and nothing caught on fire. And if it did, that wasn't my problem. It's like someone was going to take care of it. Like also like learning to trust my team and trust others. I think that was one of the biggest things I learned with the failure challenge. Like, it's not just about trusting yourself, but it's about trusting those around you
Yeah.
to help you navigate it too. And I was like, oh, if I take the day off, that means I trust my team to handle things and that it's going to be okay. Or if I'm going to post on social media, I have folks that keep me accountable in our CDL group. I know someone's going to see it and like that, puts the barrier down of like, okay, this matters to at least one person. And that's one person that I actually have a connection with, and that's important to me. I'm going to get feedback from them. Um, and so learning to continue to build community, I think really helped with these failure challenges and made it seem like, no, this isn't a failure. This is just trying something new and it's going to
Exactly.
be okay.
Yeah. And the number one reason people don't take action on their goals and dreams is because they don't want to fail, right? Just like your entry survey where you said, I want to get it just right. But failure is required in order to be successful. And I think what works so well with the failure challenge, and I remember your submissions, like some of them were like, I posted, I didn't overthink. Another one was like, I took a day off. And then I even remember you posted ones where like there was an attempt to take a day off and you were like, I still ended up working a few hours and you still were able to submit that and almost admit to like, all right, I tried this and it actually didn't work, but it was all okay. But the thing about the failure challenge is that we get to share our wins. And because the thing is, you're not just going to fail. If you're taking more action, you're also going to get more wins. And some of them will be failures, but there's something about sharing it within community and then getting support from others and not hiding the failure, which is what the human response is. Like we want to hide our failures and then only share the success. But this challenge makes us lean into vulnerability and redefine the way that we see failure, because we not only are failing ourselves, but we're seeing other people fail. And to your point, nothing bad happens, right? Like even if you don't get the amount of views that you want, like nothing bad happens. Like if anything, you feel more like confident and you feel more accomplished that you took more action.
Yes. And you said something key there, which is vulnerability. And it's one of my values. And I always say like Instagram's such a highlight reel, but if you have more vulnerable moments, that's where you create these deeper connections. I think that's what makes CDL so successful is that we're not just showing up with like, here are all our wins, like look at us go. It's like, actually, here's what we're struggling with, and let's help each other out. And that has been the biggest, I think, win for me. And one thing that drew me to CDL was the community aspect. It's like, I need community. Like, I identify that. It's like, I want non-tech people. Although I know there's some tech folks and that's still lots of love for them. But I'm like, I want more people. And like, I want to also be exposed to knowing that there's other women, other people out there trying the same things, putting themselves out there and kind of seeing their perspective, expanding my worldview. Because sometimes in the spaces we exist, kind of, to what we were talking about earlier, being like the only Latina in a room and
Yeah,
tech, you get so used to like, I can only like figure out how to succeed. There is no room
right.
for error. But when you find other people, you're like, actually, let's talk this out so I can show up in these spaces as my best, better self.
Exactly. This has been such a good conversation. We've talked about being a minority in the tech industry. We've talked about the importance of being in the tech industry, overall, like the challenges with bureaucracy. We talked about being the eldest daughter of immigrants, as well as wanting to please our parents, validation from our parents. We talked about finding purpose in career. We talked about connecting our identity to work. We talked about the fear of failure. We talked about a good amount. Is there anything that I did not ask you that like you want to share with the listeners?
Um,
It could be like a piece of advice or an epiphany or just anything that is on your mind.
yeah, I'll share two things. So I think to kind of share where I'm on my journey now is I'm in a space of just kind of I love to write. So now I'm writing a newsletter and creating content online, and that brings me a lot of joy and letting go of these metrics. I track them because I track everything and I love a good spreadsheet, but it's more about the joy in the process and not so focused on the end goal. Um, so there's that piece where it's like that's been my fulfillment right now. And then the other piece that I guess like a piece of advice to share is it's okay to change in all the ways that you can interpret change. Whether it's change yourself, change your mind. I mean, I tried launching this business twice and then I did it and then I went to baking and then I realized baking isn't really doing it right now. I need to do something else. Now I'm writing again and all these things, like giving yourself permission to change is one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
Oh, that is so good. Because we're only going to keep changing, right? Like we hear this in tech all the time, change is the only
Mm,
constant, but it's so true for
yes.
life. I love that you said that, Vidi, because I've been thinking so much about Courage Driven Latina and what exactly the program is, because some people are working on businesses, other people are working on life, and but in general, everybody's working on becoming a better version of themselves, whether it includes a business or not. And what I actually came to is that Courage Driven Latina helps you change. Like it helps you either change your career, change how you view yourself. Like it helps you with transitions, because sometimes we think we can't change and we feel like we have to stay as we are. Or to your point, like once we've made a decision, we feel like we have to stick with it to not quote unquote give up. When
Mhm.
like, no, change is natural, change is normal. And the more the less you resist change, the more growth you're going to experience. So I love that piece of advice. And yeah, you're the prime example of like business, baking, and then like what would you say is your current courage project? Is it writing?
Yeah, it's writing. So I'm really excited. I last week I launched my newsletter, Sunday Sparks by Viry is what I named it. It's a weekly Sunday newsletter where I'm alternating between kind of sharing what's bringing me joy right now or a story around the topic of happiness. And
Mm-hmm.
then every other week I kind of try to share career development, personal development, tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So it's been a really good way for me to share my experience, continue to connect with people. And it's very fun for me. It's very freeing where it doesn't have to sound a certain way. I don't have to code
Mm-hmm.
switch. I can just be myself through writing. And that's always been like a passion of mine, just writing. So I'm really excited about that and figuring out how to tie that into storytelling on social media. So I would say that's the latest courage project that I'm in. Well, finding time to bake because I still have a lot of baking supplies.
We did. We talked about this during the
Yes.
last call that we had for your prize of winning the failure challenge. I love this for you. I think this is a really good courage project, and I know that we didn't really get into like layoff anxiety that much in this episode, but I know that that was something that was really big when we first started the program, because there were so many layoffs going on and there was just a lot of anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I have to do something else. But I just want to remind you and everybody listening that you are the source of your abundance, right? It's not, Google is not responsible for your abundance. If Google as a company went under, you could go find another job, right? Or you could go start the business. You could literally turn your baking into a business. Like there's so many things that you can do. There's so many possibilities. But sometimes we feel like our current job is what's providing our safety, but like you're providing your own safety and you're providing your own abundance. And I mean, I remember being in tech and it was so hard for me to leave my job because I believed that as well, which I feel like you're already on the other side of that. But I love this courage project for you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I love your full name, Viridiana. But now I know that I shouldn't call you that because it's reserved for your parents.
Yes, only when I'm in trouble. No one's ever called me that. So now it's just I hear it. I think it's pretty.
It
My
was very,
name's
yeah,
grown on
it's
me.
elegant. Like I feel like it's a Latina Bridgerton name. Honestly, I've never even watched Bridgerton, but I've seen all the reels about it.
I
I
know,
feel
I
like it's
love
just
that.
very fancy. Like, hi, I'm Diana with like a little cup of tea. I don't know.
Yes, yes. No, oh my gosh, I'm gonna use that now when I like talk about my name. Like it's the Mexican Bridgerton version. Oh my goodness. I no, it's really pretty, but I go by Vidi and I use a Y because that's my I've never said this or shared it out loud, but that's my own form of rebellion because there's no Y in Viridiana, but it's Viri, so but I do Y. So I'm like, that's right. I'm sassy. I'm rebellious.
Yeah.
I'm not conforming, but I'm still me.
I love it. I freaking love it. Vidi, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being Encourage Driven Latina. It has been just such a pleasure to work with you and see you evolve and allow yourself to change. You said so many amazing things, and I'm sure people hearing this podcast episode resonated with all the different topics that we talked about. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on our next call.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much, Erica.
Oh, wait, where can people find you? I'm so sorry. You already told us the name of like the newsletter. So like, do you want to give us, is it Instagram a good place? Yeah, just tell us where people can find you.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at hey.viry, on my blog, hey-viry.com, or on LinkedIn. I actually am pretty active there sometimes. Viridiana Medina. I do use my full name for LinkedIn because that's important.
Perfect. Okay, make sure that you connect with Vidi. If anything resonated from this episode, be sure to let us know, tag us both, or send us DMs. All right, Vidi, I'll see you on our next call. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Erica.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. Make sure to visit theericacruz.com. That's Erica with a K, where you can subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. You can help this podcast grow by supporting me with an Apple Podcast rate and review. If you took anything away from this episode, I invite you to take a screenshot and share it on social media so that your favorite badass Latinas can also check it out. Be sure to tag me at the Erica Cruz. That's Erica with a K, because you know I want to see it. If you're ready to join the revolution and be a part of the Courage Driven Latina community, visit couragedrivenlatina.com to get more information and join the waitlist. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.